og hann kemur erlendis frá, hann írskur, menntaður rafmagnsverkfræðingur. Hann írskum ættun, býr í London og hann heitir McMahon og hann menntaður rafmagnsverkfræðingur. Áhugamálin hans eru fjallareiðhjólar og skúbadæfing, allt sem mjög vinsælt á Íslandi. En hann fer fyrir Cloud teymi HP í Vestur-Evrópu og ég lofa honum að fjalla ekki mikið það vegna þess að hann vildi byrja sína kynningu á því, bara svona til að koma sjálfum sér í gang. En það sem hann ætlar að tala the new style of IT og það verður svolítið yfirskriftin hjá okkur í dag, framtíðin eins og við heldum hún yrði og framtíðin eins og við spáum fyrir hún verði. Þannig að á þess að hafa þetta eitthvað lengra, Rob, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So, I wanted to spend around about 25 minutes talking to you about what I've seen in the cloud environment. So my name is Rob McMahon. I run HP's cloud business for General Western Europe, which is a very grand title for the countries which are in the Nordics, the Baltics, the Alps, and the Benelux countries. And what I've seen as I've been moving around those countries and talking to customers is that there's a few pieces of very simple advice that if you follow them will make it a lot easier to get success as we move forward into this new style of IT. But I think first of all it's important to set a base. What is the new style of IT and why is it here in the first place? One thing that's relatively common, I would say 80 to 90% of the customers I speak to, is that we have this divergence between what the business is asking and what the IT department is able to deliver. There's a separation between the two. And at the same time that this is happening, the business is becoming far more dependent on IT to deliver the revenue. I was a Unix system administrator 15, 20 years ago, and we used to be able to shut down data centers for 2 days while we did upgrades. That is no longer the case. Business requires IT services to be running, and it requires them to be delivering value, real value. So business has this perception now that IT is under-delivering, and there's some facts up here from the analysts. IT is under-delivering, it's late, and it's nearly always over budget. So IT is looking at a way to change this. How can I fix this? How can I move IT back closer to the business needs? How can I start to deliver value to the business outcomes that are required? And this is where cloud comes in. And cloud makes all sorts of promises. It promises to deliver things faster. It promises to deliver things cheaper. It promises to optimize and drive things far more efficiently. And anybody who's got an application smartphone, downloaded applications from either the Google Play Store or iTunes App Store, you'll be very familiar with the fact that applications are being updated far more frequently than they used to be. And you see the stat here around application releases. So this is for a single application. It used to be 4 releases a year. Now it's 52, 1 a week. And it's going up to 120. And that's moving not just in the social environment, but also in the business environment as well. And we're looking to drive costs down across the data center. Not just the cost of IT, but the cost of IT within the total revenue of an organization. But what's the reality? Because all this is great. But the CIO is stuck in the middle. The CIO, she or he has a problem. And that problem is they're not starting from the very beginning. They've already got a whole bunch of stuff in place. They've already made investments. They've got people with skill sets. They've got data centers with infrastructure, hardware deployed. They've got lines of business which have developed applications and database across this traditional style of IT. And of course, there's always existing vendor contracts, perhaps running for multiple years from this point. The business is putting a lot of pressure on IT, so IT is trying to find ways to solve it. Perhaps there's multiple development platforms. Perhaps the business has said, well, actually IT is delivering things a little bit too slowly. I'm going to go out and I'm going to grab something from the public cloud. I'm going to take some infrastructure as a service, or I'm going to take a marketing platform and deliver my services from them. The challenge, of course, isn't just around what they've got, but there's a whole bunch of requirements and constraints. There's regulatory compliance. Then there's the security aspect. I think just yesterday I was reading the off of the hacking of the Sony email. One of the executives has lost their job or resigned. Now, what that means really is the CIO has to make sure that security and compliance is there and driving the right level. So thinking about what they need to achieve is simplicity. They need to achieve responsiveness, but they need to maintain control. And it's very easy to do two of those things. You can have simplicity and control, but then generally you're slow. You can have it simple and responsive, but then generally you've lost control. Or you can have control and responsiveness, but then it's very, very complex. So the challenge is to try and get all of those together and put them in one solution: simplicity, control, and responsiveness. But in order to do that, you've got to perhaps change your business policies and your business processes. And those people we talked about before who you've made investments with, they have a skills gap, and they need to be moved forward. So you've thought about all those things, and then you start to think about cloud. And you look out there, and oh my word, there's a lot of different clouds. There's public cloud, there's private cloud, there's managed private dedicated cloud. It's difficult, it's complex, or is it? Actually, you can simplify it. You either build a service or you consume a service. You build it internally, and it will either be in your data center or somebody else's, but you build it, you own it. Or somebody else builds it, and you just consume it. Something like Salesforce.com, for example. And if you take that simplicity view and you start to think about cloud as services, that's where we at HP start. So when you think about cloud, it really is just delivering automated service delivery. And where does automated service delivery start? It starts with people. People who have a need. They have a business objective that they need to achieve, and they're looking for a service that's going to give them value, that's going to help them achieve that business objective. So, we build some services, and we put them in a centralized catalog, and we make it pretty, because it needs to be pretty, because the end user experience is very, very important. Once you've got access and you can go and select a service, there needs to be some form of control, some form of approval, because remember we just talked about the fact that you need to maintain control, you need to have regulatory compliance, you need to make sure the security levels are at the right step. And also you need to make sure that people don't go, well, what happens if I put 1,000 in? Will I get 1,000 services? Let's see if I can test the system, which happens. So you need to put some form of control in. But you can have certain level of pre-approval for users. Then the really important piece. So you've got your business objective, you've designed a service that has the service value to achieve that business objective, but you actually need to store that design in a catalog. And this catalog is where you take that description and you hold all the instructions around how to actually make it happen, how to instantiate that service. What do I need to do to make the service real? You'll notice at the moment, there's no infrastructure up there. There's no resource pools. We're just talking about the service, the people, and the requirements. And by having that layer of abstraction, when we do actually bring the resource pools in below, what we've managed to do, quite deliberately, is keep the people as far away as possible from the infrastructure. Because if I'm ordering a service, I don't actually care if it's on VMware or Hyper-V or KVM. I don't care what type of database it's running. I don't care which data center it's in. What I care about is, does it deliver the value that I need? Does it meet my business objective? Is it at the right price and the right performance? Does it have those service level agreements? And by putting the service design catalog above all those resource pools, what we start to be able to do is to say, well, actually, I think I'd like to put all of my dev and test into this resource pool. Perhaps run it on Hyper-V or OpenStack. Maybe my testing or my quality assurance, I'm going to run on VMware. And hang on a minute, cloud isn't the answer for everything. I'm still going to have my data center, and I'm still going to have physical servers and infrastructure. So perhaps I want to put production onto a physical realm. If I've abstracted my service design catalog above all that, that can then become part of the service level agreement as to where it goes. And then you have the added value of being able to drive market economics across your services. I want to move people from VMware onto Hyper-V because as an IT organization, that saves me money. So I make the service cheaper. And you watch as people migrate across because actually, perhaps they don't need the service. Maybe I want to say, everything in production needs to be on VMware. So I don't even offer the service on Hyper-V. So you have all that flexibility, you have all that capability to design and structure your services and then move the workload and the pattern across. Of course, you need to make sure that you're delivering this within minutes or weeks. So what's actually happening inside the data center? What's happening inside organizations? Well, the coder, the person who used to write applications. These were people who you didn't see very often. They wore sandals, wore dark clothes. If they were men, they grew a beard. And basically, they spent their lives writing perfect code, highly functional, as simple as possible, and delivering excellence from a compute standpoint. You may have noticed that these people have changed. They're now wearing bright colors. They wear enormous, great big headphones, plugged into an Apple device, carrying another Apple device under their arm. They're now designers. And what they specialize on is end user experience. They're designing beautiful applications which are going to change the way the world works. They still write very good code, but now they're far more demanding. They've come out of those dark caves. In their social lives, they get everything as a service. Music as a service, movies as a service. They want everything as a service when they're in the office. They want to test without limits. And they want to make sure that when their work of perfection is ready, and they want to move it to their people so that their people can understand and see how beautiful their application is, they don't want IT to be slowing the whole process down. They want to move it very, very quickly across. On the other side of the fence, in production, there's a group of people who are managing the application. But the application's changing as well, as we've seen from what the designer is building. But that's not the only place it's changing. There's another very demanding person, the user. Now, this user used to only have one or two devices. Now they have a multitude of devices. And they want to make sure that regardless of which device they're using, they have a seamless experience. If I start on my iPhone or my Android phone and I move to my tablet, I want it to carry on. If I then go to my laptop, I want to pick up where I left off. And this is putting enormous demands on the application. Just so there's a slight aside, there's a company called Ducer Technologies. And what they're building are smart shoes. Now, I've always thought shoes were pretty smart already. I mean, they keep your feet dry. If you stand on something sharp, they protect you. If you stand on something squishy, you can't feel it. What they're doing is they're taking it to the next level. What they've done is they've put inside your shoes a little vibrating insole that connects via Bluetooth to your phone, which connects via the internet to an application. And in there you say, right, I want to go for a run. Quite obviously I don't want to go for a run, but the user wants to go for a run, and they say, right, this is where I want to go. And they track and they plot it. And then as they're running, their phone's picking up a GPS signal, it's tracking them, and then their left shoe vibrates when it's time to turn left. And their right shoe vibrates when it's turned. So there is a question, if you need to have a vibrating shoe, perhaps you shouldn't be running. But if you think it's a great idea and you go out and you buy some of these from Juicer Technology, there's going to be a sudden spike on this application in Iceland as everybody goes running. And if that spike happens and you get this sudden urge, what would happen traditionally is the application would say, help! I've hit a threshold, I'm running out of compute power, I'm running out of storage power. What happens with the new style of app, in the new style of IT, is it goes, don't worry, I was getting a little bit busy, so I provisioned some more application and web servers. I've doubled the back end as well, and we got through it okay. And then you'll get another email a little bit later saying, well, actually, everybody's stopped running now, it's nighttime, they've all gone to bed, and actually, I've got rid of all those extra tiers, and I've collapsed it back down again. So you have an application which is smart enough to dynamically provision resources via API as and when it needs it. And it's all these things which are driving us to cloud and driving and pushing the business. So this is what the business wants. Meanwhile, IT is there thinking, my word, we just managed to get virtualization under control. We were going to push with infrastructure as a service. We thought that would work perfectly. And now the business is talking about running with electric shoes. What are we going to do? So what we need to do is put the service first. And when you're thinking about the service, you need to think about it with 4 specific characteristics or criteria. The value. Does the service actually bring value to the user? And does the price match the value? Very, very important. Just because you build it doesn't mean people are going to use it. It's the same internally. If you're building a service internally, you need to make sure that you get the value and the price, the speed of delivery, and the end user experience all right. Because if you don't, you won't get the adoption. So here's some tips to help you with those 4 criteria. You need to think about what services you're going to build. You would be surprised the number of times I walk in and sit down with an IT team and they draw up, this is their plan, and they start drawing all the infrastructure and the reference architecture for the cloud. And I go, this is wonderful. What's your first service going to be? Oh, we haven't thought about that yet. Are you serious? You haven't thought about your first? Why, is this an IT project? Is it an experiment? Or are you delivering business value? Have you found out what business outcomes are necessary for your business to grow? So make sure that when you're building a cloud, you understand, first of all, what that first service is going to be. I would say the first 5. But don't limit yourself. You've got to, I mean, I talked a little bit around the service existing in a competitive market. That much is obvious. But this bit here, delivering a cloud service implies the setup of a frictionless digital supply chain. In the old days, we used to have a big Z diagram with people driving trucks and rolling servers into data centers and plugging them in. The frictionless digital supply chain is I press a button, I get a fully functional service delivered. So don't stop on automation. When you're looking at how can I deliver something, infrastructure as a service is where everybody starts. You have to. It's the building blocks for cloud. But don't limit yourself to infrastructure as a service. Think about how can I take it to the next level? What can I do to add value? Maybe it's something simple, installing a backup or a monitoring agent. But add value. Always reiterate. Bring out a new version of the service. So, I've been looking at it almost entirely from the end user point of view, but there needs to be a balance. And that balance is the CIO's view. How much is this going to cost to run? Rob's painting this amazing vision of auto-scaling applications. I mean, what's the total cost of ownership? How am I going to maintain this? Is it going to be extensible? If I get a new demand, if a new service comes around, how am I going to integrate that service into my cloud? And most of all, how do I make sure that I've got the right level of security for the services that I'm offering? So you need to make sure that these are considerations that happen as well. When you're looking at those services, I do like having a big screen because it really makes this point very, very clearly. That little box all the way over there, that is infrastructure as a service. That's the first building block, very, very important, needed. But if you have automation and you have a service catalog and you've abstracted it above your resource pool, what's to stop you automating the delivery of the application, the operating system, the backup, the monitoring, perhaps even, in this case, putting an Oracle database on it? And if you can do it for one, why not do it for more? And why not link them together? Why not deliver a 3-tier application? Oracle backend, perhaps a WebLogic in the center, and maybe Tomcat as a web front end. Don't limit yourself with your solution. Because once the business realizes that you can deliver and automate things, they are very, very hungry for progress. And the good news is IT now has more time. IT has gone from building and configuring and installing to designing and shaping and moving. So you become a solution architect, perfecting the design, putting that design in the catalog, driving standardization, and then moving on to the next level. So yes, you wouldn't do this on day 2, but you do need to have this as your end game. If you're going to invest time in building this, then you need to have it open. And HP really believe in having an open platform. What that means is you can avoid vendor lock-in by having an open platform that allows you to deploy your service designs or your services across multiple different resource pools. Again, dependent on the SLA, be it traditional, be it private cloud, be it public cloud. So this is a very busy slide, but then a data center is a very busy place. And if you're moving applications around, if you're driving and changing and scaling up and scaling back down again, there's a lot of things that need to happen. So when I say make sure that you automate and provision end-to-end, these are the types of activities I'm talking about. If you need to add an application server in, there's going to be some network configuration you need to do. You're going to have to allow access through the firewalls. You're going to have to do some load balancing configuration, and you're going to have to make sure you put it in the right network as well. So these are all things which have to be included as part of that service definition. Again, this is the end game. The beauty of automation is you don't have to start on step 1 and then do step 2 and then do step 3. If you wanted to, and you already have some automation in place, do one of them. Just pick one. It doesn't matter. Anywhere between step 1 and 100, you could do 27 to 33. Automate them. And then add it to your service. So how do you do this? How do you get there? Well, there's 2 possible paths from HP. What we have is a software-only solution where you can buy the software and you can put this in place. And you put that on existing infrastructure. Or if you prefer, you can buy a pre-packaged infrastructure stack with the software and configuration on as well. And what that gives you is it gives you that portal, that cloud management portal, with that service catalog, with that orchestration content, and allows you to plug in those resources underneath, be they VMware, Hyper-V, HP's cloud system, Amazon, and they got the list is endless, to be honest, anything with an API that can host infrastructure. So the product set that I look after is called HP Helion. So I suppose I should have stood up and said, actually, I'm Rob from HP Helion, but most of you probably wouldn't have known what that was. Next time I'll say that. Hopefully you'll remember. And when I talked about services and how we have that complex cloud, if you remember all those different clouds popping up, but we can break it down into build and consume. So that's exactly what we've done here. We've broken it down into build, so we can help you build clouds, and consume. And for consume, we have partners like OpenCurfy who offer managed services and cloud services to customers. The whole premise around this is to make sure that it's open. We want to make sure that it's heterogeneous. So yes, of course, I'd love you to buy HP hardware, but it's not a requirement. It will run on IBM, it will run on Dell. We have an open source base, which allows us portability, and also means that you have all the value of the speed of development that comes with open source applications, and the ability to deploy across multiple deployment models. It's secure and it's agile. So, in summary, I'd really like you, as you're talking inside your organizations, as you're talking to your colleagues, as you're designing clouds, to make sure you think about the service first. If you think about the service first, and you think about the value, the price, the speed of delivery, and that end user experience, you can't go wrong. Because that's exactly what defines the value of the service and the value of cloud. And I'd also like you to think, as you're designing your cloud infrastructure, that you think not just around infrastructure as a service and what you're going to start with today, but what are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do next week? What are you going to do in 6 months, 8 months, 24 months' time? And make sure that the cloud platform that you decide upon can take any service from any source and then dynamically provision it. If you do have any further questions, here in Iceland, Open Kofi and Good Brandur, finally get the pronunciation correct. He has a hotline to me, so if you email him, he'll be able to get hold of me. That is the end of my presentation, but I would like to offer the chance for some questions. I think I have a few minutes. I have 1 minute. So if there's any questions. Yes.
I have only one question.
Yeah.
How does your cloud solution comply with European data protection law?
So the question is, how does our cloud solution comply with European data protection law? And it's a very good question. And it's exactly why, when I talked about public cloud, I didn't say HP has a public cloud here in Europe. Because if we did, it would be under the Patriot Act, and therefore there would be issues around that. So what we've done instead is we are not bringing HP Public Cloud to EMEA. We made that decision 2 years ago. And what we're doing is we're working with partners like Open Kofi to build out an offering from themselves. So we know that our partners have data centers. So we give them the technology, they build the solution, and then they offer it. If you buy our software or our hardware and you build a solution, well then it complies as would anything that was, it's fully compliant based on how you install it. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you very much.